Welcome. My name is Janice B. Gordon. I am the co-president of the Professional Speaking Association, PSA. Let me turn the sound down a little bit. PSA Southeast. And I'm also a visiting fellow of Cranfield School of Management. I consult and train sales teams in key account management and social selling. As a professional speaker, I talk about scale your sales. But today I am up close and personal with my friend and colleague, Noreen Cesareo. Hello, Noreen.
Hello, Janice, and thank you for inviting me. This is a pleasure, a real pleasure to be here, and I love being up close.
You haven't had the interview yet, so you don't know.
Okay, I made that statement.
Hold fire, you never know. Well, let me introduce Noreen, because I'm going to do this one a little bit different, because we've got so much information to give you. So Noreen is founder of Market Accent, a strategic marketing and branding, PR and communications consultancy. Market Accents is all about taking a step back and uncovering the insights and passions that drive your company and attract your customers. It is a dedicated international firm that works with agencies and companies to uncover the particular accents and find new markets. I see what you've done there. Uncover new market space in which to operate. Now, Noreen, can you tell us, what is the thing from your early childhood or younger life that's created the biggest impact, the things that you take forward that make you as great as you are?
Oh, that's a very high accolade indeed. Thank you very much, Janice. As you probably figured out from my accent, yes, that is part of the name. I come from a little island called Malta, which lies in the middle of the Mediterranean. It's just south of Sicily, north of Africa. So if you see it on a map, we're bang on in the middle. And we used to believe the sun shines only on us because we're only in the middle. Actually, the sun shines for a lot of time in Malta, and it gives us a particular exciting way of life, because we like to see the optimism and the positiveness in almost everything we do. And I think I bring that forth in some of my enthusiasm. So I do apologize if sometimes I come out over the top, but that explains growing up in the sun.
I love it.
And ever since I was a child, I always had this vision that when I grow up, I'm going to be, first and foremost, a pilot. And this was at a time when women weren't really pilots, but I wanted to be a pilot. That was thwarted at a very early age. So I then had to decide on something else I could be. And I actually wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be an international journalist, going around, collecting stories from everywhere. I loved the international world. I remember when I was about 8 or 9, we used to watch this program on television called The Big Blue Marble. And on this program, you could sign up and have pen pals all over the world. And I did. And I had 100. And my parents totally died, because the letters that used to come forward to me on a regular basis, and my writing, when those days we hand wrote letters. And it was brilliant, because it gave me an insight into other nations, other cultures. And I think it was this which actually opened up my eyes to the fact that although I live in a little tiny island, the world really, truly is big, but it isn't. It can get close. And I've always envisaged that I would be one day leading a consultancy where we can work together and get experts together and actually figure out ways to make the world better. So you can see how that actually all comes together in the work I'm doing now. So there have been values I've actually carried out throughout my life. I used to be in the Girl Guides as well. I've spent a long time in the Girl Guides, and I was a brownie guider, ranger. I used to have brownie packs, and I went camping, and I did all my badges. It just expanded my knowledge base tremendously, and I think it gave me.
So you would be a useful person to have on a camping trip.
Yes, I can. I'm not. I can start.
I'll have to remember that.
Excellent. So I took all that into life with me, my professional life. And I think you can see it because I'm interested in all sorts of businesses, and it gives me different perspectives on what happens. And I think the world is everybody's oyster. I don't limit myself to a national border. I think, international.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I remember you worked with Barclays, and I'm interested in the link between the work that you did with Barclays before setting up Market Accent, and you've obviously, your passion started at a very young age, but you've continued that with a passion and commitment to further international relations and cross-cultural development. So what is that link? Was it nurtured more when you through your work in Barclays?
It was indeed. When I was working at Barclays, and we were looking at expanding, well, one, introducing the chip and pin program. Today, it sounds so normal. We actually introduced that in Northampton. And I had come to Barclays from Thomas Cook, where I did foreign exchange and international payments. And in fact, I had spent some time in Canada and in the US developing the first ever foreign exchange platform. So I was in those fantastic .com days before the year 2000, sitting down and with loads of very clever people and going, what is the world going to be like in 10 years' time? How can we bring Forex into your office? And we were literally describing what today would be a normal app, a normal website. In those days, it was so awesome and exciting. We actually weren't sure where it was going to be going. So I came to Barclays with that background, having spent time working globally as the marketing manager on Forex, on corporate foreign exchange. And obviously, when you're dealing with cards and payments, we're looking at all the rates, and we're dealing with Visa and with MasterCard and with the structures across Europe. So you can see where I'm going with this. We were constantly looking at trading borders, across borders, how you actually can get the money transfers. And obviously, the introduction of chip and pin was one great advancement technologically, because we cut down on fraud, which obviously lessened the risk, because that was one of the biggest challenges everybody had to face with. So it was a very exciting time, and it was mostly very hands-on. And I was involved in setting strategies and actually looking to deploy them. So that was my work there before moving on to American Express, which was yet another international company, also still in international payments. And it was from there that then I decided that I actually think it was time for me to set up and realize that dream I had when I was a 5-year-old of leading a consultancy of experts.
Well, you've certainly continued with the passion. Now, let me tell people how I met you. This was at a Pink Shoe event, and we both know Sue. Sue invited me. I went to Women of the World at the South Bank, met Sue there, and she invited me to Pink Shoe. Now, at that event, there was a presentation of the UK Economic Blueprint for Women, and this is the first time I'd ever heard about this. And certainly, I, coming from Cranfield, I'm very much for the quote. I have strong views on women in business and women in leadership, and so I've followed that through for many years, good 10, 20 years, and also kind of diversity. So this is where I met Noreen. Now, she's going to give us more information about the economic blueprint. But then we met again in the APPG Women and Enterprise. And this is now, if those people that don't know about APPGs, they're cross-party consultation groups. And so again, Women and Enterprise is an area that, we're both passionate about. And what we do is we ensure that the challenges and opportunities for women entrepreneurs are heard. And we're both women entrepreneurs. Now, our group is chaired by Craig Tracy MP, and he oversees all of the work streams. So the work streams are skills and education, diversity and inclusion, data and information, business coaching and support, access to finance, supply chain, and international trade and connections. And it was really interesting because when I was first introduced to the group, there was an email that went around to say, well, what's your experience? And I've worked in Botswana and America, and what kind of business do you have? And when I walked in, then I was down as myself and Neem Baker was down as chairing the group, and Neem then left. And it's like, well, how did that happen? I haven't even attended a group yet. I'm chairing this. Anyway, then I spotted Noreen, and I know that she's got so much international experience and connections and things. So I grabbed her really fast. And so that's, we've been working together for the last 2.5 years. So I only happen to be chairing this, but we do work very closely together. Now, Noreen has put together a report that's been submitted to the APPG. And, you know, we've both done lots. There's been other members that have come and gone, but I think that, you know, we've done the greater part of the research and put it together. So I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to talk to you more about APPG, Women in Enterprise, you know, all of the wealth of groups that are around for business people to get involved in and get heard. So this is why we're having this Facebook Live now. I am definitely going to set up another one with Noreen just to talk about market accents and just to find out more about her. But we really wanted, because it's really an opportune moment with Brexit and all the craziness that's going on, to talk a bit more about this, to really ground it. So Noreen, first of all, because I know you're so super connected, tell us more about the organisations you're members of and why. What do they bring to the table?
Right. That is I have to remember the list so I don't leave anything out. You've mentioned some of them by name, and in a funny way, when I start telling people about what I do and what I'm passionate about, they actually start seeing that they're all connected. And I believe in serendipity, and that drives a lot of the people I meet, the organizations I get drawn into, and the causes which, like you, some of them are very dear to my heart, and I'm happy to dedicate a lot of voluntary time, because let's put it down on the table, this is mostly voluntary, towards creating better opportunities for everyone, and not necessarily just women, even though the direction we're taking at the moment is for women, and that is because it opens doors. So let us start talking about UK Economic Blueprint, which is one of the key pointers that led on to the APPG being created for the Women in Enterprise. You mentioned Sue. I'm assuming you're talking about Sue Lawton. Sue
Yes.
Lawton is a super duper connector of people. I had known Sue from my days with the Commonwealth Girls Education Fund, because I am a trustee on this very, very worthy charity that educates girls in Commonwealth countries where they cannot afford to have an education, and they would otherwise end up being sold into marriages, being cut. It is a future which is too bleak to actually talk about. However, we're trying hard to make sure we give them a future. So I had already been dedicating my time towards creating better futures for girls internationally through the Commonwealth. And Sue was one of the trustees, and together with Judith Fisher, who was then also quite an active member on the board, we were looking at connections that could be drawn in. So through Sue, I started hearing about Pink Shoe. And at that stage, because I'm not a feminist, and I need to put this down very clearly, I am not just a feminist. I actually believe in getting respect and creating business wealth for all. I started going to some of their events, and I thought, I like what I'm hearing here. And I joined Pink Shoe, and Pink Shoe is actually an organization that is influential within the corridors of Whitehall. And we lobby and we create positive footsteps, we call them, in areas where we need to go. About 5 years ago, Pink Shoe set up a conference that actually looked at what is the state of women in business today. And they called it Female Quotient, FQ. And it was at that stage that they teamed up with this company in the States called WIP, Women Impacting Public Policy. And they told us about what they do in the States to actually make sure that women organizations get a share of the wealth. Sideline to that, I'm also a member of We Connect, which is an organization that accredits companies like myself to say that we are women-owned. And we have within that organization part of the supply chain, so the leading companies globally. And the idea is that we actually can create opportunities within the supply chain for women-owned businesses. So Women Impacting Public Policy, Pink Shoe, We Connect, these all started merging in their connections and in the same people that we're talking to. And We Connect was in fact also there at FQ. And from that came out the blueprint, the economic blueprint, which are the 10 points which we hope to change within the UK to start creating opportunities for women-owned businesses to have access to finance, access to markets, access to research, and access to training and HR. It sounds like, oh yeah, this is what everybody's talking about, but they are actually four important areas of which we know now, especially Janice, and you understand this, there is so much work needing to be done in all of them because there's no representation, there is no data, there are no role models, and yet women are 51% of the population, hence female quotient 51. So we need to actually make sure we have more of a visibility. Our visibility at the moment is zilch. We get numbered in small, under 10 percentage points. So we're not that big enough to actually even almost have a say on the table. So I started getting rather passionate about this needs to change. If we really need to create better wealth in the country, and we know that let's put it this way, we have had the worst of the economic storms thrown at us in the last 10 years. How are we going to create a better future if we're not working towards it? So that is how I ended up in the UK Economic Blueprint. And within that, I am a lead marketing member. I sit on the core team, and I'm also on the Access to Markets workstream. And within the Access to Markets workstream, once again, I started looking at the international stream. We're also working with looking at the actual platform that we need to create to make sure that women-owned businesses like you and like me, Janice, will have access to tenders that come through. So we need to create the framework for that to happen. But that's a different story. I'm not sure I have enough time to run through it. Running on a similar track was the APPG. So you notice that probably a lot of the people who sit on the APPG, we keep on mentioning UK Economic Blueprint, because when Craig was looking at the work streams, Jill, who runs the Senate for the UK Economic Blueprint, suggested that they actually get laid on top of each other and they map each other so that we can share the data. And that is why we have Jill leading data within the APPG, because that is something that she's looking after tremendously from the Senate side on the UK EB. When you and I sat down together with Neem in those very early days, and we're looking at what are we going to do for the international trade, and we started looking at the various options, because let's put it this way, we really had to create our own brief at that time, if you remember correctly, but we knew that there was a big gap. So we started market mapping the universe so we can understand where we're going. We started from a lot of women-owned businesses tend to be micro businesses. So at that stage, how do we actually understand where they're going, their challenges, their opportunities for growth to scale up? And we're looking also at the challenges coming from trading internationally, most of which are also running concurrently with digital companies with a small d. I'm not talking of just them. So it's digitally working across using the internet as your platform. And that is where we then kicked off our work, as you said, exactly 2.5 years ago. And we have been speaking to the good and the mighty across in all the various departments. We have spoken to NGOs, we have spoken to businesses, we have spoken to women-owned businesses, we have spoken to nearly most representatives of everywhere. And as you rightly know, and I know, when we sat down to write our report, there are so many gaps. Even now, there's so many gaps. So we have strategies being put together internationally. Here in the UK, the government is looking at how can we explore what's going to happen after Brexit, what is happening beyond our borders, how do we facilitate that? And our team is looking at, well, how are you facilitating women to have access to that pie? Because, as we found out, they're not that visible once again. They're there. Some of them are there not even understanding that they actually trade internationally. They don't call themselves exporters, but they are. And yet they're not listed. There's no data covering them. There's not enough support in the infrastructure to actually help them grow and scale up. So that covers what we're doing on the APPG. Now, something else which I've also gotten involved in recent months because of the work I've been doing, and I've been attending some meetings. I attended the Commonwealth Women's Forum in April through the trusteeship, and in fact, I am actually playing within the Commonwealth arena. And it was there were a lot of people discussing women and trade and international connections and exports. And whilst you have international organizations like ITC, which are setting up she trade, and there's a lot of incentives coming across, you can still see that there's a lot being put on the table, but they're not really working cohesively together. So we're still at that talking stage. We haven't started doing the doing, if that makes sense. That still has to come along. And in fact, at that time, I also teamed up with Way Forward, WEA, which is Women Impacting Economic Empowerment. And we're working to actually see how we can merge that globally. So I'm working with a wonderful woman called Margot Thomas, who I had met at a previous Shrugam in Malta. And she is involved in W20 and UN high-level meetings. So I was invited to attend the Chatham House public policy meeting last week, which was very interesting because I was talking about all the exciting work we're doing. And all I can say, Janice, is there are so many opportunities for us to get our hands into, push, and go forward. So I'm really excited that we're arrived at the stage where we're taking the report forward, because that will be launched, correct me if I'm wrong, later on this year, right? And
I think it's October, November when they will, because we have submitted our interim report. There are surveys that are going out, so there's a lot of the other work streams that haven't got as far as we have, but we have put an awful lot of work into it. And so there'll be one tranche of work streams that will be in the initial report for the end of this year, and then more of the research information from the questionnaire and surveys that's going out will come through next year. You know, it's interesting because you've brought up quite a few points that there is a chasm of gaps. And as you know, Noreen, what gets measured gets done. And what was frightening, I mean, really frightening, and this is the government, that it's not measured. So it actually, people anecdotally say that there's a problem, but they don't know how big it is and you don't know how deep it is. So then it doesn't actually, it's not a problem that's ever going to be solved. And so I think you're absolutely right. We have to keep pushing to make sure that we do have a voice. And 2 years ago, we were talking to some government departments asking for data. And then after probably about 6 months or so, they said that, well, we don't collect that data. We don't know. And we've been thinking about it. And I would guarantee 2 years later, if we went back and asked them for the information, we would get the same thing. They're still thinking about it. So there's a real problem. Is that, you know, they're not driving this internally. So this is something that we have to do. So Noreen, I want to ask you a bit more about our research, because, you know, some of the key issues and themes that come out from UK SMEs, women-owned businesses, and their ability to scale up and to trade internationally. What do you see as the main factor hampering or stopping women-owned business in this area?
You know, that is a loaded question, Janice. It is also a very hard one to answer. There are too many to just pick one out. And this is the truth. We have spoken to a lot. And when you start distilling, what you end up with is the one thing you pointed out, it is not tracked anywhere. There is no data to back it up. But the other 2 points which came out and very loud and clear, one, we do not have in place the support for the infrastructure for women-owned businesses to actually flourish. So I may tell you there aren't really many gender-specific challenges that I can pick up that are pertaining only to being a women-owned business, because when we've spoken to a lot of women-owned businesses, they all mention the same issues that a lot of male-led companies face. However, and this is where it starts going deeper, it is the understanding of how women operate that actually is there as an impairment. So whether it's accessing the finance, whether it's going on the trade trips, whether it's even being respected in negotiating when you're in a meeting internationally. We recently spoke, and I can see you smiling at this because we're both awed at the person who was talking, and I will not mention it on this call, but they go abroad, they sit down on the table, they are negotiating trade deals, they are the owners, they are the key decision makers, and the people they are sitting with turn around and say, do you have enough authority to actually have this conversation? Can we speak to your boss? And at that stage, you wonder whether you just grab your cup of coffee and throw it in his face and walk out. But he's a key person, you cannot do that. So you just bite your tongue and you say, yes, I have full authority. I am the MD. I am the CEO. This is my company. You will not be able to speak to anybody higher than me. So the respect isn't there. And it isn't just locally. I mean, in the UK, there is a long way to go towards having universal respect for women-owned businesses. I think there's a lot of lip service being given, but when it actually comes down, you still have a lot of preconception that is there. So yes, we will have you around the table, but when we're looking for notes taking, somehow we all look at you. When we're trying to get the coffees organized, somehow we'll all look at you. And it's those what I call housekeeping that automatically belittle you in the eyes of everybody else. And we do it naturally because we don't even question it. But even sitting at the negotiating table, we face it. I know this is an issue even with women in business across corporates. I have come from a corporate background. I have faced glass ceilings. It is there. You fight it. Now, we're not going to go man bashing because that's not my aim, and it's certainly not yours, Janice's. But I would like to say, please give us more respect, because we can actually collaborate with you, and what we will bring to the table is exponentially so much larger than what you can do on your own. So yes, the support structure to get women-owned businesses to scale up and to get them in front of the right people isn't there. Or if it is, the doors are closed. Or the people who are directing them do not understand either the digital world or the challenges that women face. And
it's interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. It kind of reminded me of something when I did my MBA at Cranfield, and there was a visiting lecturer or someone coming in, and they were doing diversity. And so there was this French woman that came in and did diversity, and she was had done some research. I think she was a PhD student, done some research, and her answer to the problem was that women need to go on courses and do mentoring. So like women had the problem, and it's like, honestly, I was furious. No one in my MBA had seen me, so I literally stood up and I, kind of like challenged her that actually if the structure, if the organization is broken, you don't solve it by picking out a few people that are highlighting that it's broken. You actually need to look at the whole organization, the whole culture. And it's just, this is why we're so passionate about this, I think, because it's shocking and it's surprising, really. You're absolutely right. Lip service, we'll just collect the data and then we don't think it's lip service, really. Why? How can you be thinking about it for 2 years if you say, yes, this is an important problem? Obviously, there isn't the leadership that is putting this in place. And we're not talking that this is just a government issue. This is a societal issue. Because I remember we were speaking to a trade advisor, and you remember that you're right. There isn't any one thing that it's just that if you fix this thing about women, then the whole thing will be fixed. It actually goes a lot deeper in that. If there are, say, 25% of women in SME businesses, women-owned businesses in the whole, 25%. Well, when you're talking about exporting and you look, well, it should be more women. Well, actually, you're coming from a smaller group of people. So you're not going to have 50 women that are going to be exporting. So it's not necessarily on the export side, although we've got real big issues. We discovered some things around that. It's actually, you need to go back further in how you're encouraging women, and then how women are being educated, and what all the blocks are in the way. So you need that there's 50-50 women in business if you want 50-50 women that are now exporting and across the board. But you're right, the respect isn't just abroad. It's frightening that I've met an advisor that was way past retirement that talked to you like you're a little girl, that you need to get past this trade advisor in order to get anything done. And in every level, they had a kind heart, but they're of a different generation where they really belittled women in everything that they did. In the little jokes and things, and the way that they kind of like smooched up to you. Absolutely. It was a different generation. It was the wrong person for the job. And if you talk about digital and, new products and innovation and things like that, again, it was lip service when it comes from a woman. But when it comes from a man, then they get kind of like the red carpet rolled out. So I think that the role models in these advisors, in the government, we need to see more women there, where we don't have that issue. We don't get that not black. I don't know what, your experience kind of is in corporates and the organizations, whether, you've experienced that yourself. It's not just international, it's just generally in business.
Yes, it is. And you hit the right word, role models, whether it's role models coming from business owners, role models from women sitting on boards, role models from women directors. It's funny that they've carried out lots of research and they find that the women in boards number is actually very low. And recently they were talking about non-executive directors, women. And I said it was easy to appoint a woman non-executive director because they don't really have an impact on the day-to-day. So when you actually looked at the numbers of the executive directors who implemented day-to-day business, the number of women
pathetic.
On that level, pathetic, thank you. And it is all over. So yes, there's still very much a ceiling which I don't like to see, and I would like to see eradicated. I don't want to see the lip service that's going out, and I would like to see less patronizing, more respect, more acceptance. That we shouldn't, hopefully in 5 years' time, we won't even be having this conversation because we're outdated, because women do have a say, they do have a place on the table, and they are being respected. And I think that actually does sum up, even internationally, we need to make sure we have a seat at the table and we are on that trade mission going out, and they are looking at how we can actually further women entrepreneurs globally to grow the economy globally.
I mean, certainly because of this just general culture, patronizing, and we don't want it to be that, it's like that. I mean, it is like that across the board. We kind of accept the way things are, kind of stuff. But, like there are women that get through, but they get through despite, not because of, really. So their job, their path is always so much harder. There's a higher expectation of them, and, men are allowed to fail, whereas women aren't quite so much. Certainly not against men, but we just kind of want a level playing field. We want it to be fair.
Yeah, and I know it sounds threatening because a lot of males would probably think like, wait a second, is that not my opportunity? Why should I allow you to take it? But what we're actually saying is it's not that point. We believe there's enough opportunities that we can push. There's enough women-owned businesses, even locally. I mean, you and I were just talking earlier on before the call. I was looking at one of the latest figures. I think it says there are, at the moment, 1.2 million women SMEs in the UK. We know that's a far greater number because that does not pick up the women below the VAT threshold. And that does not pick up women who are maybe they've started the company, they had to become not women-led businesses, but are 50, 51 purely because they took a step back, had a family, then went back, and circumstances changed. But you still have had that as a woman founder who grew that business, and then it's taken off. So I don't see why our representation isn't greater, really. And I think it will only further and maximize the opportunities and not limit them for male-led businesses.
Well, I'm going to have to wrap up now, but just remember, I'm going to be interviewing Noreen again. I mean, I know Noreen, she's so well connected, got so much information, really, really passionate, that, we're continuing to work together, so please do comment. We will go back in and answer all of your comments. This morning we were at All Party Parliamentary Group for Enterprise, move it this way, and they've just launched their report. And so we're still collecting data. So if there are women-owned businesses out there that have had an interesting interesting experience of, trying to export or growing their exports and scaling up, we would love to hear from you. If you can refer someone to us that, might get into our kind of wider report, we would love to hear from you, because we've got to be heard in order to change things. So I'm going to leave the last word with you, Noreen.
Thank you. And I'm going to add on to your plea. So if you are thinking of going into enterprise, if you're a woman-led business, you heard us talk about the UK Economic Blueprint, you heard us talk about all these various initiatives. Come forward, step up. We're trying to do a lot of work with very few resources. I mentioned Pink Shoe, which is led by Helen Martin G. She's done amazing work in trying to get people together. And yet we're constantly still going out trying to speak to organizations. We have FSB on board. IOD are working with us. Chambers are working with us. Many women organizations. But we need more. We want to stretch it out. As they say, the world is our oyster. So please contact Janice and do come and join us. Janice, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love this. I will come and speak whenever you want. I know we were working well together and there's plenty more work to do. So many more exciting months ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Noreen.